Okay, so we've got a basic wall here, just a masonry brick metal stud wall. I've set it from level 1 to level 2, nothing special about the height. And I've got these 4 windows. Now, the first 2 are M_fixed windows, just the default, the one that comes to your cursor just by default when you select the window tool, the 406 by 610. They match. This one is a similar family of window, but it's a different type. So you can see it looks the same, but it's actually been registered in the type selector as a different size. So it's a different type. And then this one is a completely different family. We'll get to that one in a second. But what I wanted to do initially is talk about the difference in Revit between family, type, and instance. And at the very basic level, what we're looking at here with these first 2 windows are 2 instances of the same type of window. And we've talked about this a little bit already. We want to make changes to these and just see what sort of impact it has on other instances. The very easiest way of making changes to any particular type of object like a window in Revit is to just select it and perhaps move it around or move it in a floor plan view or 3D view. I can also look here in the properties window and I can look to see what properties are listed for the instance. So you can see here with this example, with this particular instance of this simple window, that I have a head height listing here. So if I make a change in the properties window for this instance, it's not going to affect any other instances. If, for example, I change this 1,525 millimeter instance height for the head to something a little higher, let's say 1,800, hit enter, you'll see that this window gets raised. It doesn't affect this instance here. And that's because at this very most basic level of editing, I've just changed an instance property. So beyond that, if I decide that there's maybe something about this that I want to change, like for example, if I click on that and 406 millimeters by 610 millimeters isn't quite the right size, if I click Edit Type and go into the Type Properties and make any changes here, what's going to happen? Right. So because I'm going to the type level, any instance that uses this same type information, it will update with whatever the changes may be. So if, for example, where it lists, let's say, the width at 406 millimeters, if I highlight that and change it to something more obvious, obviously wide, like 800, and click Apply, then both of these instances get updated with that new information. We've already seen that before, so that's not news. So what do I do if I want to change just this instance and not the one on the right? We've looked at this briefly. All right, well, let's have a look. So I'm just going to undo that type attribute change. If I click on this one and I want it to no longer appear like this one, I can go to the Edit Type button here and adjust the type properties, but I have to make a duplicate. So if I click on Duplicate, it'll ask me for a new name. And let's just say that I'm going to make this a 800 millimeter by 610 millimeter window. Okay. Now the name doesn't matter. This is just a name. It doesn't impact what the actual properties are. So you have to remember to actually change the name and change the number here. So it's right here where I'll enter 800 and then I'll click OK. Now the one on the left changes because I gave it different type properties and I made a duplicate so those type properties don't get mimicked in any other instances. This is now the 800 by 610. This one is still the 406 by 610. Now notice when I did that, neither of those changes affected this one. Even though it looks the same and has the same sort of initial part of its name, it's actually a different type. So this larger window that I placed when I made the initial model, the reason why it didn't change at all is because, of course, it has a different type listing here in the type selector. So that's why it remained independent. So first level of modification is to change the instance properties. You're not often going to see too many things that you can do there. The next level is to change the type properties, and that's where you make a duplicate if you want something unique and you don't want it to repeat those same changes in other instances. And then beyond that, we have the family level of making changes. So notice that all these windows here on the left They look similar. They're built the same way. They have the same extrusions. They have the same material properties. And even though they are three different types, they are of the same family. So when you want to make a deeper change and change something about the family file, you just click on any one of the three in this case. And then up here on the Special Context Sensitive Modify Windows tab that appears, you'll see an option here to edit family. If you click on Edit Family, it'll take you to this view. And this is actually a brand new file. So if you'll notice up here, the name of the file has changed. This is, in fact, an m_fix.rfa file. RFA means it's a family file. Notice that the interface has changed. I've got fewer tabs. I've got some tools here that are grayed out. So just be aware that this is a completely different environment. And it's actually quite common for you to get to this point by just doing something accidental like this. You can double click. So I'm just going to double click here on this window. And this is a very common mistake to make. You meant to just click once on it, but you clicked twice, and it took you right out of the Revit RVT or project environment and took you to this environment. And so you're wondering what's going on, why your tools are missing, why everything looks different, and you're wondering how to get back to your main project file. So be aware of this. That's one of two ways to get to this RFA environment. And I'm not going to do anything too elaborate here. There's a lot of complexity that goes into building family files in Revit. I just wanted to point out this one subtle change that we're going to make. And that is that I'm going to click on the inner part of this window frame. I'm going to use these grips, and I'm just going to drag the inner part of this extrusion into the middle. So what I've done now is I've changed the basic kind of core information about how this window was built. Once I've made changes here in this RFA family environment, then I can just click here on Load into Project. And then I'll get this little prompt here. Now, because I had an RVT file open, that's a project file, when I bring a family file back into this environment, Revit knows that something about that family information has changed. And so it asks me if I want to overwrite it or overwrite with its parameter values. I'm going to take the bottom option and watch what happens to these windows. So now all three of them take on that little modification. And it's a pretty significant modification, so it's probably a good thing that it occurs in an environment that's kind of separated from the regular project environment. But just be aware that that's the hierarchy of Revit. It's a family, and then below that a type, and then below that an instance. Notice, of course, that none of the changes that I just made there had any impact on this window, because not only is it a different instance, it's a different type, and beyond that it's also a different family. We won't really do much with modifying families. That's something for later on. But we will make changes frequently to the instance, and then maybe more significantly that we'll make changes also to the type